Well, it's been a while since I did a strange retro games episode, and what stranger game to review than 1989's Weird Dreams. Things are going to get a little weird. Weird Dreams was released by Rainbird, which was one of the labels by the short-lived Telecom Soft that was started by telecommunications company British Telecom when they decided to branch into the ever-growing computer software market. Many of you will probably remember seeing Weird Dreams for the first time on a segment of the Saturday morning kids TV show Motormouth. Long before the game's release, a modified version was used in a quiz on the show where kids would answer general knowledge questions in order to progress through the game. This was no doubt a way of advertising the upcoming game to its target audience, and it seemed to work, as many kids were hyped up for the game and went in their droves to their local game store, only to find it wasn't even out yet, and it wasn't a quiz-based game. The creators of Weird Dreams, Herman Serrano and James Hutchby, were inspired by the paintings of Salvador Dali and Terry Gilliam's cartoon animations for Monty Python when creating the various scenes and creatures in the game. The game came with a 64-page novella written by Rupert Goodwins that told the backstory to the game and explained why your character Steve is having these, well, weird dreams. Unfortunately, my copy is missing this book. Weird Dreams was first released on the Atari ST in April 1989, and ports on the Amiga and PC soon followed. There were versions planned for the Amstrad and Spectrum, but they were ultimately cancelled. However, Commodore 64 owners eventually got the chance to do battle in this strange dreamscape, but had to wait until early 1990 to get their hands on the game, and it's that version I'm going to be focusing on today. So what's the goal of the game? Well, Steve is having surgery to stop him from having these dreams. Survive the nightmare long enough for the surgeons to finish the operation. And I just wanted to say, those 4 masked surgeons standing over you, pure nightmare fuel. If you die in the dream, your heart rate spikes in the real world, and Steve flatlines. So no pressure then. As the game starts, you find yourself in a huge candy floss machine. Either that, or you've been shrunk down. The object here is to simply escape, but not before getting a few blobs of the pink stuff stuck to you, as you will need those on the next screen. The Commodore 64 version is the only one where the stick won't kill you, so just simply stand there until you have enough candy floss stuck to your pyjamas, then if you time it right, jump onto the stick to be lifted out. After escaping the candy floss machine, you're back to normal size, being chased by a giant wasp through the funfair, and here is where that cotton candy that is stuck to you comes in handy. The wasp is carrying a blue orb, and you need 3 of these to complete the game successfully. Simply drop a trail of candy floss to slow the wasp down, so you can pick up the fly swatter and hit the wasp as it's eating the pink blobs. When the wasp is far back enough, swipe the orb and head on into the Hall of Mirrors. This is basically a level select screen of sorts. Go through the mirror on the far right to find yourself in an English country garden. And I apologise in advance if you get this tune stuck in your head. Sorry. There's 2 screens to this area. The first is pretty easy. Just pick up the stick and attack the rose monsters before moving on. One thing that is missing from this version of the level is that on all other ports of Weird Dreams, if you take too long fighting the roses, a lawnmower will appear and, well, you'll see later when we check those out. The next screen had me tearing my hair out and swearing profusely. As you approach the little girl, she throws a ball at you. If you don't time it right, the ball eats you. So the object here is to catch the ball and throw it back so it eats her. If you allow the ball to roll off screen, she comes at you with a knife. In order to get the ball to eat her, you have to catch the ball and throw it back 5 times, and on the 6th you have to be stood in exactly the right spot, and I'm talking pixel perfect. Once the ball eats the girl, it bounces up onto your heads-up display, as you're going to need it later on. After exiting the garden and going through another mirror, you end up in a desert with flying fish. You need to jump up and catch one because you will need a weapon. Yes, that's right, you use a fish as a form of defence in this game. Once you have the fish, you have to face these... how do I put this in a family-friendly way? Sorry, I can't. These stone dicks with legs. After a few screens of those things, you're faced with the creature from the box art. After defeating 2 of those, there's this gangly statue thing that you need to slap with the fish to get the next orb before the quicksand reaches you. And remember when I said you'd need the ball? Well, in this section of the desert you can't go anywhere, so by pressing B on the keyboard, the ball drops down and makes a pathway for you to walk along. After going through another mirror, you find yourself standing on a massive piano with this creepy looking jester clown thing. Make your way along the keyboard, avoiding the keys that stick up, and then you have to avoid being kicked off the screen by this big ballerina. Get past her and another set of jumping piano keys, and you need to grab an electric eel from the tank, but make sure it's stopped flashing when you do or you'll get fried. Head back into the Hall of Mirrors to fight off the giant wasp from the funfair and go through the final mirror into this hallway. As the lights blink on and off, you have to carefully edge left and duck under the bats. Eventually, you'll find the light switch, jump to turn the lights on and then head back the way you came, jumping over a couple more bats, and then you come face to face with the chicken monster. Jump and grab the middle light fixture and then start swinging. Once you've got enough momentum, you can jump over the beast and carry on to the next screen. Stand in front of the grandfather clock and push up and fire to release the third and final orb, and then exit through one of the doors. Either one is fine, providing the pendulum in the clock is pointing to it, and then it's back to the desert to face the final boss. Hit the 3 spheres circling the brain, and then the brain then eats them. And that's it. Another game with an anticlimactic ending. Well, at least this one has an end screen of sorts. So Weird Dreams only got 3 other versions: the Commodore Amiga, Atari ST and PC, so let's take a look at those. Now, these versions are a lot more difficult in comparison to the C64, as that is considered the easiest. These 3 are pretty much the same, except for some subtle differences, such as music and sound effects, but they all have this little intro animation at the start, showing Steve falling into the dream world. Perhaps the main difference between these and the Commodore 64 port, aside from the more visually pleasing graphics, are the death animations, which are a lot more gruesome, such as the bit with a lawnmower, which I mentioned earlier. And finally, these versions have a little end sequence that shows when Steve wakes up after his operation, his troubles are far from over. Like the games in my recent videos, Weird Dreams received mixed reviews from the magazines back in the day. Computer and Video Games reviewed the Atari ST version in the April 1989 issue and gave it 59%, whereas Ace magazine scored it an Ace rating of 830, and The One gave it a whopping 90%. Commodore User awarded the Amiga version 80% in late 89, but Zap only scored it 60. In that same issue, they also reviewed the C64 port, giving it just 52%, but the lowest score came from C&VG, with only 36%. So here is the tragic reality of Weird Dreams. As a piece of interactive surrealist art, it's a masterpiece. As an actual video game you have to play, it's absolute garbage. The jump mechanics feel like Steve has lead weights in his pyjamas, and you will die over and over again, usually because the game decided you didn't stand on the exact pixel required to trigger the next event. But it is a fascinating time capsule of late 80s computer gaming ambition, where a bizarre concept and striking visuals were enough to get a game onto store shelves, regardless of whether it was actually fun. Weird Dreams is a game that I mostly recommend watching someone else play, on YouTube for example, rather than inflicting it on yourself. So what did you think of Weird Dreams? Did you have this fever dream of a game, and on what system? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video or have a taste for nostalgia, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. And one thing I always forget to mention is ring that notification bell, because it lets you know when I next upload. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Sweet dreams.